Hello, everybody. This is the Tennessee Twos Disc Golf Podcast. Man, it has been a while. Um, Apologies. So sorry it's been so long since we've seen you last. If you want more details onto most of the reasons why we've been gone for a couple of weeks, go check my pinned tweet on our Twitter. It'll give you most of the information you're looking for as to why we took a week off, basically. Unfortunate, but I don't really want to talk about it here. So go check that out if that's what you want. If you don't really care, welcome. Um,
Welcome in.
to help make up for it a little bit, and because it's the biggest event of the year, essentially, we're going to be doing two episodes this week. So this one tonight, and then join us again Friday
Friday
night.
night.
Um, Friday night's not going to be nearly as long of an episode. Wager it's probably only going to be 45 minutes to an hour. Basically, just recapping rounds 1 through 4, the cut line, who made the cut, notable names missed the cut, and just kind of giving our takes on what we expect to see out of the final round at Worlds. But other than that, thank you guys so much for joining us. If you're listening to this at as an audio podcast later on, just a quick reminder: we do go live on Facebook. When we do this, if you guys are on Facebook and you're not getting the notifications, make sure that you go to our page, click it's a bell on the app, and I can't remember what it is on the actual website, but basically you just need to change the notify on all live videos,
Yeah.
because otherwise it's only going to send them to you every once in a while. But if you change that setting on our actual page, it will notify you every time we go live, no matter what. Without further ado, before we get into anything else, I would like to thank our sponsor for this video, which is, of course, Lone Star Discs. Lone Star Disc is a family owned and operated disc golf manufacturer located in Conroe, Texas. They pride themselves on being the only disc golf manufacturer that currently produces, stamps, and ships all of its own product directly from Texas. Their main focus is to provide consistent and high quality discs to disc golfers all over the world. They really do a great job. One of the things that we love so much about them, and one of the things they really pride themselves on, is consistency. And for any of you who have used a lot of these brands like Discraft or Innova, you're very familiar with the concept that different runs create different molds and slight variances that fly different. And it's one of the things that you're basically never going to get out of Lone Star. It's one of my favorite things about them. The only thing you really have to worry about is the plastic type that you choose. The plastic type will play a little bit of a factor in the stability, but for the most part, the molds are going to be nearly identical from run to run to run. You're always going to get the same product you're looking for every time you buy one.
Yep. Very much so. And shout out to Lone Star. Um,
Yeah. I believe that you were telling me they released a new bag
yeah, they
as
did.
well.
It's actually really nice. I can't wait to get my hands on one. It's definitely gonna make uh make a lot more sense than the bag setup I have now. Everybody that carries my bag right now, when I first got it, it's a dynamic discs paratrooper. Um, When I first got it, it was great, like, truly. Um, it held all the discs I needed. The only thing that I've had struggle with is the straps on them. Like, all the padding is just gone. So, like, everybody that's ever caddied for me is like, "Golly, I wish I'd have switched to my bag." I was like, "My bad. My bad. My bad." But,
uh,
yeah, hopefully that'll be a thing of the past soon. Um, so kinda leaning into, uh where we left off previously on our last episode. To the audio listeners, um, if you are binge listening at a later date, you will not have known that we missed 2 weeks. Um, but um, we, as tournament recap uh, podcasters, would like to at least spend a little bit of time on both Ledgestone and Des Moines Challenge. Um, I'm gonna hit a little bit on Ledgestone. He's gonna hit a little bit on Des Moines, and then we'll roll right over into our World Championship preview. So, before I get going on placements and anything, is there anything that stood out to you about Ledgestone?
Um, the biggest thing that really stood out to me at Ledgestone, if I had to pick one thing, was it was really the first time where I felt like Paul Macbeth failed to show his ability as a closer. Um, for this season at least. He
Right.
has been very, very close in a lot of tournaments. He's played very well. He's, got a lot of top five finishes. Honestly, if you look at his finishes throughout the year, it's not indicative of what we feel like his season is. In fact, it's much better than what the outside looking in our feelings of his season have been. And you might say, well, what about European Championships? He didn't close that out. Well, yes, but it took basically sheer perfection from Eagle McMahon to stave off Macbeth in that tournament.
Yeah,
You're
a
talking
normal
about
human doesn't do that.
exactly. You're talking about a tournament where Paul Macbeth took a course that was, 2 to 3 strokes per round more difficult than the previous time it was played, and he outplayed his previous tournament by 10 strokes and
And it
still
wasn't enough.
lost.
Yeah.
It took superhuman play by Eagle McMahon at Ledgestone, that was the biggest, takeaway for me was like, wow, this is where Paul really should actually make a chance or an attempt at closing this tournament out. And at least being in contention for the win, and he didn't do it. He pretty much flopped on the front nine where he really needed to make up those strokes, especially while Ricky was missing some,
Right. They
and he
both
just
kind of
didn't do it.
struggled there for a little bit. Um, but yeah, I do agree with that. Um, I do want to go ahead and congratulate Ricky. Um, Back to back Ledgestone wins. Technically, um,
Technically,
last year it was rain delay or lightning. It was postponed. It was like cut short, but I don't remember the reason. It was for a storm, right?
yes,
Okay,
yeah.
so it was
So
Calvin and Ricky that tied for first.
yeah, had a co-winner situation out at Ledgestone last year,
Yep, that
which
was
was
not the
kind of a
case this
really
year.
a really sad send off for the first time we got to see Northwoods Black in the tournament
Right.
setting.
Yeah.
Um, but Northwoods had a much better showing this year. A lot of people were very impressed with the new. The layout was basically identical to last year, but the fairways were cleaned up very nicely.
Yeah. A little bit more
Um, a
fair.
lot of a lot of people complained or kind of retracted their complaints from last year about it being a little bit gimmicky and this, that, and the
Hmm.
other, and it still played essentially as difficult as of course as it did last year, but with a little less complaints to the gimmicky side. So that speaks wonders. Basically, it means they did not diminish the difficulty of the course while still managing to clean it up
And
to the
make
player's
it fairer.
satisfaction, and that's so difficult to do.
Yeah.
That I can't even explain how hard that is to do.
Yep. So huge shout out to Nate Heinold for making that happen and his team. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead and get on into the
Oh, the
uh,
one thing
placements.
before
Okay, what you got?
before we get too much farther
Yeah.
and go into the placements, I do have one other complaint, and this is not a complaint against Ledgestone, but rather a continuation of our ever or never ending complaints of the PDGA rating system. Because for those of you who didn't see it, Paul shot 12 strokes better than what was 1,000 rated, the final official rating for 1,000 in Northwoods Black, and got a 1063.
Yeah. There's no way that each stroke is 5 points.
And I understand, like, if you read the way that they rate, it makes sense and the math checks out. The more difficult that a course is, the more likely you are to basically have lower separation. And because there's less scoring separation, that means that the scoring separation in terms of the ratings is also going to be diminished quite heavily.
Right.
Meaning that the more difficult a course is, the less every stroke means
Right.
for the rating.
But if you think about it on this note, right? If you shoot an 18 down, that puts you at what, 1080?
Basically, so it
So it would be
required
if it so 6 strokes better.
Yeah, it would you needed to post basically a perfect round at Northwoods Black for it to be 1100 rated.
That's wild.
And I understand the explanation for why the math checks out that way, but the logic does not check out. You
Yeah,
cannot tell me that it takes a perfect round on the hardest course in the nation on tour to be 1,000 rated.
$1,100.
If
Yeah,
nothing, excuse me, yeah, 1100. If
gotcha.
nothing else tells you that the rating system is broken,
I
that
mean,
does.
yeah, just go shoot 1,100 easily at Memorial. It's fine. So moving on. uh, so coming in first was Ricky Wysocki at 26 down. Paul Macbeth, uh, as we had mentioned before, not really closing the gap any at 22 down in second. Gannon Burr, 21 down in third. We're just going to continue to see his name in the top 10. It's just it's just there. He's there. Um, and then coming in fourth, Anthony Barella, shooting 20 down. Uh, and then tied for fifth was Corey Ellis and Matty O, 19 down. Um, One thing that we got to see was Anthony Barella really take control of his game. Um, it, he looked very good from what I seen,
Yeah. Up until the final round,
which is kind of his
yeah, that's kind of it's the MO for him
right.
is and I don't know if it's the pressure, the emotions, just the general self-control. Um whatever his mindset is in the final round, it just feels like that needs to change
Yeah.
because he was literally one stroke off the lead heading into the final round, going into the easier course to score on,
Hmm.
and ended up with two down in the final round,
Yeah.
um, which put him 6 strokes off the lead.
Yep. Uh, Coming into the final round, he played like somebody that could win the tournament. Um, so yeah, I think if he can figure out the final round woes, he will finally tack tack one onto his scoreboard.
Yeah,
Um, Corey Ellis, we get to
that's
see Corey Ellis again. Um, Seems like the later part of the season, Corey Ellis really comes on strong, and that is holding true to this season
which
as well.
which could also be very very scary considering how good the early part of his season has been so far
Yeah,
compared to what his usual early season
right.
play has been.
It's kind of one of those. I feel like he took it another step forward this year, um,
Absolutely.
and I would expect probably the same thing next season as well. Um, and then Matty O, I didn't get to see any of Matty O's performance. Um, I know that he shot 19 down, so he had to have done pretty good. I know you can pretty much look at Matty O and see buttery smooth and some good putts. So
Matteo had a couple of rounds that were a little bit head scratcher in
yeah,
this tournament, but then he made up for those with two rounds that were just kind of like,
lights out.
wow, okay, bud.
Right,
Like, you are here. You're here to
definitely
play.
here. Um, and just wanted to note, um, in Ledgestone tournament, Simon Lazat and Paul Ulibarri um, placed at 26th. They tied for 26th. The only reason I wanted to note that is going into uh, the next weekend. So just keep that in mind. Um, and then moving over to FPO, you had Missy Gannon taking it down at 19 down. You had Owen Scoggins in second at 13 down. You had Lisa Fakis in third at 12 down. And then you had tied for third was Kristen and Paige. Oh, I am sorry. I apologize. Lisa, Kristen, and Paige were all tied for third at 12 down.
Yes.
That is my bad. I see where I put a 4 and then scribbled it out and put a 3, but I just rolled on with it. Um,
Just roll with the punches, bud.
yeah, that's all you got to do. Um, So yeah, congratulations to Missy. She's had. Is it fair to say that she's had a sneaky better season than last year so far?
No, I wouldn't even say sneaky.
Yeah,
When you look at everything that she did last year, she did not come alive until very
until the
very late
very
in the
end.
year. And this year she has shown competitiveness early in the season with some takedown ability a couple of different times this year as well, which is something she didn't even show last year.
Right. I agree. Um, we just haven't talked a whole lot about Missy just because like she's always there. She's always in the top 10, top 5, but like she never quite gets the podium when we have the time to talk about everybody on the podium. Um but
I don't know. We've talked about her quite a bit. I mean,
we did,
her name is
especially for
at the
Music City
very
Open.
yeah, but we've danced around with her name at least a couple of times doing
Mhm.
our power rankings and stuff like that as well.
I do think that
Um,
this helps her tremendously on the power rankings.
oh, absolutely. That's not even a question.
Mhm.
And if we have time today, we might even update our power rankings if you have our old power
I
rankings
do. I have them handy.
available.
Yep.
And the only reason I say that, if we do that, we'll probably do that after Des Moines before Worlds.
Yeah. I think that would
Only
be good.
because I'm also curious to see how ours will stack up against the new power rankings system that Statmando has released. I don't know if you've seen that yet.
I have not seen that yet.
So Statmando has a new power ranking system, and so if we do anything about that, what we're going to do is give our power rankings before I pull up Statmando's power rankings. I want to make sure that we're not swayed in how we,
Right.
assess our power rankings before seeing what they do, and then
I
we'll
like that. I
compare
like
and
it.
contrast, see what
Yeah.
our rankings do compared to theirs, and see how
Yeah.
that works
See
out.
how our eye test does versus their stat test. I like it.
Absolutely.
Um,
Um,
so yeah, that's pretty much all I got for Ledgestone. We spent about 10 minutes on it. So again, congratulations to Ricky and Missy, and we're gonna kick it on over to Daniel and talk about Des Moines a little bit.
well, Des Moines, the Des Moines Challenge. Listen, the funniest thing about the Des Moines Challenge is it was, and don't get me wrong, I have had so much stuff going on in my life this month that it was kind of hard to really be excited about a lot of anything.
Hmm.
And I won't go into too
Understandable.
much details about that, but I mean, I was already not that excited for the Des Moines Challenge to begin with. Um, but the Des Moines Challenge blew me away.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because I went in with low expectations or if it was really that good. But I have to point out that even if it was just because of my low expectations, the amount of disc golfers that came out on their socials, whether it was Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever it was, the amount of disc golfers that came out and said, whatever Des Moines was doing for this event,
Everybody needs to
do
take note.
it.
Yeah.
Do it. You guys need to implement this into the way that you guys run your tournaments, because whatever they were doing, it worked and it was wonderful. Um, and I think that showed also on the competitive level. So, what we actually got to physically witness and watch out there on the course, and the excitement that we got to see really showed. I have one complaint about the entire tournament, and we'll get into that in a second. And outside of that, I thought it was wonderful.
That's
So, without further ado, FPO taking down the win. We had Kristen Tatar taking out second, Evelina Salonen taking down her first podium of the year, Macy Vela Diaz. And then fourth, and then tied for fifth, you had Kat Murch, Sarah Hokum, Erica Stinchcombe, Paige Pierce, and eighth and ninth, you had Kona, Henna, and Heidi Lane. Um, really, Paige, she kind of held her fate in her own hands, and she just kind of let it slip a little bit.
mhm.
Now, I'm going to say this once, and I might say it one more time when we talk about MPO, but going into the Des Moines Challenge week, one of the things that I had posted on Twitter at least a couple of different times, and interestingly enough, it kind of became like my real, like, you guys really underestimated this tweet. It got like no likes, no shares, nothing. And then the end of the week came out, and I kind of reshared it to Green Splatter, and they were like, "Wow, you saw this coming." So basically, what I said in this tweet was, I think everybody needs to kind of keep in mind that this is the last tournament heading into Worlds. Basically, saying that there's going to be a lot of players out there looking to tune up very specific part of their games, especially the highly competitive players,
Right.
whatever that might mean, you know. Um, and I think Paige Pierce never really looked defeated or frustrated or angry out there. And that to me tells me that she's working on, there's something in her game that she wanted to clean up before Worlds, and she was fairly satisfied to do so.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the coin, we haven't gotten to MPO yet, but I want to say the same thing about Paul Macbeth. Two of the prime contenders and people that we're going to talk about, a lot going into these Worlds conversations. He went out there and just threw some atrocious shots all over the course between him and Paige, and he never really looked angry or defeated, to the point like he was taking himself too seriously
Right.
like he usually does. And that tells me that he's working on something, whatever it might have been, and he's happy about the outcomes of the things he is working on. And my point about that is when players kind of start getting into those modes, you better watch out because it means literally anything can happen.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things I think that benefited Kristen Tatar a ton, being the best player and being out for so long, means she had the most in her game to work on. So she needed to tidy up a lot of her game, not just one or two things going into World. And I think that ended up giving her a major competitive edge in this tournament.
Yeah.
The course played fairly well to the way that she wanted to play, which was less backhands, more forehands, try to avoid her injury as much as possible.
Yep.
For anybody who doesn't know, her injury has been more severe throwing backhands than it has forehands. So she's trying to avoid the backhands actually as much as possible. Um, Keep that in mind when we talk about world's predictions a little bit later. And I think that kind of gave her overall a competitive edge, the ability to play her game the way she wanted to. She still had a lot of things in her game she wanted to clean up before Worlds, which means she was out there trying her best on every single shot, not just what are the shots I need to work on the most.
Right.
Um, and she ran away with this tournament. We're not going to sugarcoat it. She took this down, 15-11 was the second place competitor in Evelina. Um, 15 down to 11 down was that final score. And in that final round, Kristen was literally never in danger of losing this lead at any point. Uh,
No.
she was
Um.
a cool cat
Yeah.
pretty much the whole round.
Yeah. She took care of business. She is and can be a closer. We've seen her falter a little bit this year on being a closer. Um. But pretty much after Champions Cup, um, she's been solid. Very, very
Yep.
solid.
Yeah, I can't, I can't undersell what we might have seen out of Kristen this year had the
Mhm.
injury and not derailed her. And the same could be said about a lot of players this year, but Kristen in particular, you're talking basically top three in every single tournament this year, um, and no injury. Where does that possibly get her? Something interesting to consider.
That is one of the most astounding things, though, is on the podium every single tournament that's that's been played over here. Every Elite Series and Major.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Well,
it's only
not
been
not Europe.
one major, so
Yeah, well, we had European Open, but
sh- she skipped that.
she didn't play it. So,
Yeah, and she skipped, U.S. women's, so
hmm
you know she's only played one of three.
yeah,
But we know we get number two here, so
yep, that is exciting. Um,
um,
yeah,
but we get ahead of ourselves. Now, the one thing that I really wanted to um, point out was Macy's play
okay,
this year. Um, Compared to what we have seen a lot from her this season and what we saw from her this week, in round one and I don't know round two off the top of my head, but I know round three was actually fairly similar to round one in this respect. Um, Macy had nearly identical fairway stats and tee stats to Kristen Tatar. Um, I mean, she basically, if her putting was on point, where she missed out on 9 of her 13 or something like that birdie opportunities, um, and I think 6 of those 9 being in circle one.
Right.
If she puts better, you're talking that Macy is tied or at least within a stroke of Kristen going into round two.
Right.
Um, but I only point that out because I think it's important to note that that's one of the things we haven't seen out of her the last few events in particular is her tee and her fairway game has been off, to say the least. And usually when her tee work is off, her putting's going to be off as well, um, by even more so than it usually is. So now we're starting to get to see her back into her element of being one of the better players off the tee in the fairway. And can she pick her putting game up to where it needs to be competitive? Because if she does that, I mean, shoot, you might have to really watch out for her out at Worlds.
Yeah.
Um,
She's got the
just something
distance.
to consider. Oh, absolutely.
Oh no,
For
that's
those courses, yeah.
something good to point out.
Yeah, and
Um,
don't forget DDO was also the site of her 300-foot eagle throw in earlier
yeah.
this year.
Yep.
So,
Got good memories already.
but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yep.
uh
Um, so I guess you're gonna go ahead and go over into MPO.
yeah. Yeah, let's
Um,
get into it.
I honestly can't wait to talk about the ending.
The ending. Oh my
Yep.
gosh.
But let's just I'm gonna let you
We're
race and
gonna
work us
I'm gonna
there.
start
You know,
I'm gonna start at the top, work my way down through the top 10,
and then
and we're gonna
work
work our
over.
way from the bottom of the top 10 back up to the
Okay.
top. All right. Taking down the win, as we all know, Simon Lizotte, really fantastic weekend out there. Taking down second, um, Robert Burridge, really fantastic play. Tying for third, you had Emerson Keith, Kevin Jones, and Joel Freeman, as
And
well as
and
Evan Smith,
yep.
one of the more surprise names on this particular podium finish. Then we jump all the way down to tied for seventh, which will round it out. That's going to have Cal Klein, Matty O, Andrew Presnell, and Mason Ford, all tied for seventh. So the one thing, I guess now I have to say I have two complaints about Des Moines because I didn't really think about the lower part of this leaderboard quite as much.
Hmm.
The MPO side of the course probably needs a little bit of scoring separation mechanics.
Yeah.
It does seem to be missing that.
Yeah.
Um, because basically, we'll put it this way: if you go, Simon Lizotte and Robert Burridge up there at 27 down, respectively, um, versus 21 down and 20 down from tied for three through the rest of the top 10.
Right.
So obviously, when you have ties near the top, going into especially the back nine of any course, generally you're going to see a little bit of an elevated play. Um, for example, like what we saw with what happened with Eagle and Paul battling
Yep.
it out for that entire Euro Championships. When two players are duking it out and going head to head like that, they're going to play better. Iron sharpens iron, right? So I don't want to talk too much about what those 27 downs mean compared to the 21s, but basically it shows that because they were competing for the title against each other, they were playing a little bit better
Right.
just because they had to. They didn't have a choice. But there definitely needs to be a little bit of scoring separation on that course. I couldn't tell you what the best options were to create that. Um, but anyways, I
Yeah.
digress.
Yeah. I
You
don't
know,
know. Um, I
I don't
did
know.
want to. to note one thing about that, kind of to add what you're saying about scoring separation. So if you look at tied for 16th, you have Chris Dickerson, Paul Ulibarri, Paul Macbeth, Andrew Marwade, Austin Hannum, Nicholas Antilla. Um, I mean, that 16th position is stacked. It was stacked. I was like,
Yeah.
um,
It's there.
it's
That's
that was a lot. Um, Also wanted to point out, Chandler Kramer finishing tied for 12th. That was his uh,
yes.
best Elite Series finish so far. Um,
Yeah, he kind of struggled when he, first coming back to
Came
the States
back,
after
right,
after the Euro trip. He struggled a couple of times. I know he had mentioned some things were off with the form, definitely struggling a little bit with some soreness. I'm not going to call it an injury, but I know he was struggling with some soreness, so
right.
not uncommon for a forehand dominant player
No,
either.
not at all. But it was good. Good to see him kind of push his way back up onto
Yeah.
the leaderboard. Um, yeah. So, do
Now,
you want to talk about Evan Smith?
yeah. So let's start with Evan Smith. Evan Smith went into the final round essentially with um, the lead.
Oh yeah, he had the lead.
So, you know, first of all, kudos and congratulations to getting there
Yes.
because he's a little bit more green than I would say Isaac Robinson was
Yes,
when he was the surprise leader, um, you know, back at Idlewild.
I agree.
But if you look at their overall resumes, Evan Smith's resume in the course of his 2 years is pretty equal to what we saw out of Isaac Robinson. So I was probably one of the few who didn't really discount his chance to win quite as much as a lot of people were, basically saying it's basically a race for Simon Lizotte at
Which
at that point.
I know it ended up happening that way, but it did kind of bother me um, that the commentators were uh, taking him out of the equation until Nate Doss kind of redeemed himself. And he said, I was him. You know what I mean? He said,
Yeah,
I was Evan Smith. He said, I was the one that nobody gave credit to. He said, but I earned it. He said, and it's time for Evan to go out and earn it. And, I
yeah,
think he definitely earned some credit, but at the same time, it was a good way for them to both be right and still knowledgeable and not just
yes,
sounding uh, hateful or biased, you know?
yeah. And I mean, a couple of times that I had kind of pointed out, like, well, when people were discounting Evan and saying, well, he's not.
Hmm.
It's a race for Simon now and any of the big names that could possibly catch up to him at this point. And I said, well, honestly, that's exactly what all of us said about Isaac Robinson, and I got the same reply probably 15 times,
Yeah.
which was, well, Isaac was a lot more established by that point in time. Excuse me,
I mean, but
my guy has won. He has won a single A tournament in his entire career leading up to Idlewild. And in terms of if you look at the last 2 years of what Evan and Isaac Robinson had done comparatively to each other, they'd essentially won the same amount of B tiers and C tiers respectively. So the only difference between them, career trajectory wise, was that one A tier win by Robinson.
right.
The truth is, we had no idea what Robinson would be capable of in a final round of an Elite Series event because he's never been there.
Yeah.
And the same thing for Evan Smith. And that was my biggest argument was like, why are we discounting this guy after we spent an entire final round of a tournament discounting somebody who completely slaughtered the rest of the competition on the final day?
Yep.
Was it likely that Evan Smith was going to do that? Absolutely not. But it was not that much more likely that Isaac Robinson would do the same thing.
Yeah.
And you know what? Nerves came. Nerves showed up.
They did.
But I can tell you the one thing is that those nerves will not be quite so bad the next time around.
Absolutely. All he's got to do is fight to get there. Now he'll be a little bit more prepared for the next time.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking basically he's got 2 years worth of open division um, tournaments under his belt. I mean, it's a little bit longer than that, but of seriously playing in open division tournaments.
Right.
Um, and he's 10-20 rated. That the kid's definitely going to be going places. I'm not going to
Yeah.
say that he's showing the kind of talent that we're going to talk about him like he's Paul Macbeth someday, but he's definitely somebody that we could start talking about like a Kevin Jones.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. That's a very good. Um, that was a very good comparison there. Um, I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
Um, so still a podium finish. Um, it's a very stacked podium. They're all going to have 1 foot on it. Um, but wow,
Podium's a
anytime
podium, my guy.
exactly, anytime you have 4 players tied for third, it's kind of wild. Could you imagine? Just imagine like a 5 or a 6 way playoff at the end. That would have been disgusting.
That would have been nuts,
Which,
dude.
if good course design happens, then that should never really be an
No.
option. Um,
No, and look, this I think it's a beautiful course, and I think it's actually honestly designed fairly well overall, but it needs some work.
yeah,
And it doesn't need like oh my gosh a complete revamp. It just
no,
needs
not at all.
every some of these holes just need a little more like what can we do to create some extra scoring separation?
Yeah,
That's all we're talking about.
I agree.
Um, Now, Emerson Keith, honestly, was really impressed with that tournament he went out there and put up. Kevin Jones, honestly, the same way. I think Kevin Jones' final round goes a little bit different if we see him birdie or par hole one as opposed to taking that bogey.
Yeah,
It set the tone,
that
and yes,
momentum, man.
he was able to fight back very well until about hole 12, and then he petered out a lot of players really petered out after hole 12 or 13. And that
Yeah,
was kind of if we want to talk about what the difference was between what happened with Simon and Robert towards the end versus what everybody else was doing, it was how they responded after hole 12, really.
yeah,
Um, and now, the one in the tied for three that I want to talk about a little bit more is Joel Freeman. Um, and the interesting thing about Joel Freeman is that he continues to garner loathing and lose respect throughout the disc golf fan community.
right.
Um, and I have to wonder, number one, how warranted is it? Number two, what does he need to change to change this persona at this point?
Yeah,
Because it is swung so severely negative. I mean, the best way I can explain it is like there are people like that saw him on the lead card and were like, I'm rooting for every bad shot he throws, basically,
yeah,
is where we're at. And they're not rooting for the bad shot to see the negative reactions that he's becoming accustomed to giving. They are rooting for those bad shots because they are fed up with the reaction he's giving for shots like that.
yeah,
And half the time, I mean, there was one time where he threw a shot that yes, it was bad, and I won't. I take that back. Actually, it wasn't a bad shot. It was just not what he wanted to do, and still ended up with a great result. Basically, smack dab in the middle of the fairway, still was going to have a chance for birdie on this hole, and he's just yelling at himself and yelling at the air around him, and people took notice of that. They're like, "Bro, you just threw a 400-foot shot that landed right in the middle of the fairway. You're going to have an easy up and down for birdie." And here you are yelling at yourself.
yeah. He's going through some struggles right now. We don't really know why. um, it seems like ever since he's kind of got more notability, he's used his platform to try to change things, and instead of changing things, he's come across as a whiner,
Yeah,
and nobody
you
likes
know,
that.
one of the things that we've seen out of him was like the situation, 3 or 4 weeks ago, where we're talking like, you know, uh, 3 or 4 months ago, we got on Paul Macbeth for
Mhm.
basically posting that whiny,
Yep.
whiny kitty crybaby. Instagram over what happened at
He's
Jonesboro.
been known to do that as well.
Right. And then we got on to him about that. Um and Paul is a little more like, he's like, he always starts it with, I went out there and I played my heart out, and yeah, I got some bad breaks. I wish this didn't happen, but I'm still happy with the results of whatever happened. And you know, one of the things that Joel had more recently kind of got called out on is like, hey, I had a bad round because I got 7 or 8 bad breaks in this round. I mean, you're talking, I this should have been a 10 down round and I got 3 down.
Right.
And Paul says a lot of the similar things, but Paul says those things about one shot, or one bad break, or one this. And Joel tends to have this, like, he gets more bad breaks than any other player, is the way
Right.
that
It's
it's
always like
portrayed.
it's the woe is me character, you
A
know?
little bit. And the sad thing about it is that the more that he's gaining this notoriety, of being a good level player, and we talk about him more often, obviously people are going to see that, but people are coming out of the woodworks that have known him for a long time and saying, hey, this is who he's always been. this
Right.
is this is exactly the Joel that I knew playing in C tiers, you know and I just have to wonder, number one, is it even the real Joel? And maybe he just doesn't understand his platform yet,
Right.
to a degree that he's reached. um And, number two, does he need to take an internal look at this point and say, you know what?
Well, you know what's wild is like it's not all of his social media either. Like it's mainly Instagram. Truly because a lot of people really love his YouTube channel. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't do the complaining and stuff on there. But as most players do, they do a tournament recap on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, and it when it comes across as, well, this went bad, this went bad, this went bad, this went bad. People just get tired of seeing it. Um, oh, there's a lot of players that post on their timeline, story, whatever, and they're
Hmm.
like, I went out, I just didn't shoot well, you know?
Yeah.
And boom, that's easy. Got you. You know what? Try again next time. Thank you.
I had a bad week.
Yeah, it happens. It
It's
happens.
it's really funny. That's one of the things that I love most about, um Brody in particular, when he talks about his rounds.
It's all
And
his
Brody
fault.
gets a lot of hate for a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that, you could make justified arguments about, sure, whatever. But the one thing that he's never done, I don't feel like, is he's never gone out there and blamed the course, or blamed the weather, or blamed an injury, like, a couple weeks ago, struggling with his knee, or, actually at this tournament, struggling with his knee. He's never gone out there and blamed anything other than himself. It's always, I didn't play well. I missed these putts.
Right. And
I struggled.
even if he says, that this hole is fluky, like he said, but I'm aware of it. That's the way that it plays. So therefore I have
Yeah.
to find the best way to play the fluky hole.
And the funny thing is too, is like, if you hear him talk about how a hole is fluky, or a hole needs some changes, or the course needs some changes, he also says that, like, in his practice rounds on YouTube before the tournament.
Yes.
When you get to the tournament and after the tournament, he never uses those as an excuse.
No.
When it comes to the actual tournament, it's always, I didn't play as well as I should have.
Yeah. I agree. I do think that that is a very professional approach to it. And
Understandable.
and yeah, I appreciate that.
But let's talk about the exciting stuff.
I mean, come on. Like,
I w- I want to back it up real quick. Back this all the way up to the beginning of this conversation about the Des Moines Challenge, where I said I was not excited for this.
mhm,
When we got to hole 16, my heart was racing. I was literally on the edge of my seat for the rest of this tournament.
yes. It I, it was so good. It was so good. I don't know who Robert Burridge is. Okay, he
You do
came
now.
out of nowhere, and this man, when he's on, is a wrecking ball. He's literally
Bro,
a
he was
wrecking
a
ball,
laser.
dude. And his putts, I it just
I mean,
he was
I have to
so
put it this
good.
way.
He was so good.
For for anybody who didn't watch, number one, go back and watch. If you
This
don't
is
watch anything
a
else from this
final
tournament,
round to watch.
lead card, final round, watch this
Please do.
because there's a couple things, three things, and I'm gonna start with the first one. Robert Burridge threw one bad shot on hole 15 that basically cost him the tournament because it doesn't go to a playoff if that doesn't happen. I'm going to go backwards a little bit farther and say, well, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong about that because there was also hole 12 for Simon,
Yep.
and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But, if that doesn't happen for Simon, also could be a different scenario as well, but also possibly not. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But if you look at that, we're talking about a kid that nobody's ever heard of basically through one bad shot in a final round that essentially cost him the outright win. And of course, we know what happens. He goes to a playoff, loses the playoff,
A
um,
four-hole playoff, by the way.
a four-hole playoff,
And
and
if he doesn't hit a
the
stump on the
worst,
last hole, eh, it's a
the worst,
possibility.
worst break probably of all time to end it. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest. You still also you have hole one of the playoff where probably should have hit that putt, but it
Yeah,
was a difficult putt at the same
it
time.
was.
You're putting downhill, straddling out from behind a tree, uh, and you just kind of sail it. It's just, it's
Right.
what happens when you putt downhill. You're gonna sail some. Even the best putters in the world, it
Yep.
doesn't matter. You're gonna sail a
Especially if
putt
you're
every now
trying
and
to give
again.
it a legitimate chance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and that of course that being after Simon had really botched an upshot
Yeah.
um, that he really shouldn't have.
But
And
I
then
think that's
honestly,
that kind of play with them still being so great was kind of what made it so electric because it was like, oh, it's
yeah,
in his favor. Oh, it's in his favor. Oh, it's in his favor. Oh, it's in his favor. And it just never was either. Like, it was
yeah,
exciting. I loved it.
it it was wild. Now one of the things I have to point out in the playoff, I don't want to discount what happened on hole 3 because Burridge hit the iciest cold putt
Hmm.
in a playoff I have personally ever seen in my life, especially something that I was watching live and not
Yeah.
like post produced. Oh, this already happened like a week ago or a year ago or something like that. He hit the coldest putt you will ever see. To be fair, that hole did not belong in a playoff.
It may not have. Yeah.
I've never seen a hole where I've looked at, and this is the thing about hole 3. If you guys didn't watch, it's the only hole that's on the course where literally every player who talked about that hole said the same exact thing, and they said it's finicky. At least a few trees need to come down before it's a good hole. And the commentator said the same thing earlier on in that round. Like honestly, this hole needs a few trees to come down before it's a good hole.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind, shouldn't have even been on the roster of a playoff, but it
No.
was. And wow.
Yeah. That was actually
We're-
it was pretty much uh, everyone's least favorite hole on the course, but
yeah, for good reason.
it gave us some great content. So mm, it happens sometimes like that.
It really does. The outcome doesn't necessarily justify the means, but it
Yep.
was there and it was awesome.
It was. It truly was.
It
Um,
really was. Now, the only thing I have left about the playoff,
I've got
at
something left.
hole 4, after he hits that stump and shoots off, was laying it up the right choice?
I don't know. I mean, Simon's 38 feet away, and he's been hitting putts all day. We on this podcast always say if you have a chance to take the win, you take it. But in this scenario, it's somewhat of a chess match. Um, and if you're not 100% confident that you're making that putt, I think laying up's the right decision. And you
Yeah,
force your opponent to make the putt.
and I agree with that. I 100% condone the decision to lay up there because here's the alternate outcome. He's at 60 feet directly behind a tree that's tall enough to basically make an over the top play out of question. So he needs to Annie bend one around the left, or he needs to Heiser bend one around the right side. Um, it's also 60 feet downhill. And
Yeah,
again, as we talked about on hole one, where he had a 40 footer that he sailed,
sailed. And there's water this time.
and there's water 10 feet from the basket, literally 10 feet. We're not talking like 20, 30. Oh, if it's a bad break, maybe it hits grass and catches edge and rolls. No, if he misses this, it is in the water. There's zero chance that it does not go into the water
Yeah, no chance.
unless he lays it up. And he makes, I think he makes the best decision possible in that situation.
I do too.
Force the other guy to make the putt because the thing is, if you sail that and you go in the water, Simon gets to lay up twice and still putt
Exactly.
to just to go to the next hole, and he gets to lay up from 40 feet for the win. You
Yeah.
can't leave that door open. 100% the right call to make him miss a 40 footer
Yes.
for a continued playoff
However,
because it's a 40 footer. It's
yeah, it's
still,
not a give
although
me.
he, no,
Not at
absolutely
all.
not.
But I got chills when Simon putted and then before it hits the chains, he goes bang like that.
The finger gun before it was even in.
It
Oh,
was electric when he went bang. I was like, he just shot me dead.
he done it.
He did it. I
He
was
done the
like,
thing.
what? It made the crowd erupt, and there was so
Absolutely.
many people there. Like holy cow, there was so many people there. But
100%.
you know that they got to see some of the best disc golf. You know what I mean? Like everyone at that event had an amazing time, and they will 100% be there next year.
Oh yeah.
It's just
The
gonna
funniest
grow.
thing too is you heard so many people talk about it. It's not the biggest crowd that they saw so far this year, but it was one of the most electric that they've seen this
Yeah,
year.
the
And
most
that makes
involved too.
such a big difference.
Did you
I
hear?
mean, we'll
Go
put it
ahead.
this way. For those of you who don't know, I'm from Nevada originally, northern Nevada, the Reno area, to be particular. And there was a time for some of you who might be basketball fans, especially from out here in Tennessee, who might be a little bit more familiar with these players being from the Carolinas. When the Martin twins, who now play for the Heat and the Charlotte Hornets, respectively, and they played in Nevada with a coach down in Arkansas now called Eric Musselman. And we did not have the biggest stadium in college basketball by any means. But one of the things that we did have was one of the loudest stadiums in
Right.
college basketball. We're talking about a basketball stadium that's probably half the size of the biggest schools in the nation, putting out the same decibel levels. And the last year that the Martin twins were there, they basically went undefeated at home for a very good reason. Having an electric crowd, no matter what the size, is such a difference maker.
Yes.
It's so hard to explain that.
And that's why there's so many people, so many of the professionals that came out and said this tournament is 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 the way it should be. And everybody loves those fans. Did you happen to see any of the Ezra clips?
I did not.
He had a guy that was a fan, and he was yelling at Ezra the time, entire time. And he's like, "Come on, Ezra, drain this putt. You got it." While he's setting up, and
Yep.
Ezra fed off of it. Like he fed off of it. And
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, with the shades on, with the shades on." Ezra took his glasses off. He said, "I can't see with them anyways," and bangs a putt from 45 feet. It was it was electric. Like I would have done anything to have been a fly there. You know what I mean? And I
Just a little fly on the wall.
yeah, just a little fly on the basket. Well, maybe not the basket. I don't know. It'd be a dead fly. But
Yeah, nope. I'm out.
still, I really did think that that was funny, and I kind of think that that might be a little bit of a preview to what some of the events will be like. Um, because you look at golf tournaments in the PGA, they always compare PGA to disc golf, as in like the fans are loud, blah 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 blah. Well, if you look at any PGA clip, the fans are talking, and they're talking to the players. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like that's just the way it is. I think that it's okay to have that. And I think disc golf, I think it makes it better. I loved those clips. It literally
I
gave
don't
you
have a
so much
problem with it.
content. It Ezra was like eating off of it. So many of his Instagram reels were because of this guy. He should have paid him. Literally. He's like the
We don't.
dude. He's like the
I
dude
gotta be
on.
honest. To be fair, we don't know that he wasn't paid to be there to begin with.
Well, that's a possibility. I'm not gonna lie. But I feel like as long as you're not disturbing the peace, um,
Oh yeah.
I feel like having a crowd behind you and somebody motivating you like that all the time, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
True. All right, down to the bad. To the bad side. Uh,
Dun,
hole
dun,
12.
dun.
Like, we already ripped apart the rating systems tonight. Why don't we rip apart the PDGA one more time? I guess.
It won't be the
Um,
last time tonight.
that's fair. That's a fair point. So for those of you who didn't see on hole 12, that was the hole that Simon Lizotte made a Mando and then missed a Mando, all on the same throw. And you might be asking, well, what does that mean? What do you mean he made the Mando but then still missed the Mando? Well, for those of you who don't know, the clarification to the Mando rules after the new Mando rule was put into place at the beginning of this year basically stated that if you have a Mando, there is basically an infinite wall that crosses at any point of that Mando. And you can go on this side of the Mando, doesn't matter what direction you're going, but you cannot cross this line in any way, shape, or form. If you go past it, and you cut roll or something and it goes through the Mando on the other side in the other direction, doesn't matter. It's still a missed Mando. So basically, what we saw was this is exactly what happened, that Simon made the Mando, and don't get me wrong, not a good shot. Okay, it was a very bad throw. And he makes the Mando, hits a tree, kicks across the fairway because it's a double Mando, and enters quote unquote restricted airspace on the other side by crossing the other Mando, going backwards. And he gets called for a mandatory violation and has to take it at the drop zone. We've talked about this rule at
Well,
least once already.
I just get to say that we are geniuses by saying that this was one of the stupidest rules they've ever come out with. Um,
It's
it
oh,
it's so dumb. All right, did it give us an epic playoff? Potentially, but did it
yeah.
need
Well, I'm
to?
gonna I'm gonna make an
No.
argument against that anyways. If we're
Yeah.
being completely honest, I have an argument against that. It changed the outcome in any way. Um, I tweeted out, it's easily the most popular tweet of the weekend for us. We said it before, we'll say it again. The new Mando rule is trash. If you make the Mando, you make the Mando. Once you pass that point, nothing else should matter. Because it's true. The whole what's the whole point of a Mando? Explain to me, like, if you thought about somebody put a Mando on a course, why is the Mando there? There's two reasons in particular I'm thinking of.
Safety is the number one reason because it's either crossing into other players' fairways, or there's a road or a trail or a parkway. something like that. Safety is the number one reason for a Mando. Um,
Mm, I think OB is. I would qualify that under the OB more than the Mando rule.
no,
But
absolutely not.
yes, I agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
safety is 100% the number one reason.
But
Um,
and when we're talking about like course design as a whole for these players, because that rule does not apply to this hole, for
yes,
example.
right. It doesn't
So
apply to
there's
this hole. So there's
so
technically not
there's
really a reason other than trying to make the hole harder.
yes. So when the in terms of course design, when you think about Mandos, yes, he's correct. There are safety concerns, but honestly, a well-designed course shouldn't have those to begin with. And for the most part, on these courses, OB lines actually dictate those for you. So the Mandos should not be as important. Should not be,
Right,
because the OBs should tell you, hey, you're not supposed to go over there.
right.
That's the whole point of the OB lines. Is you're not supposed to be there. Um, but for high level, elite level courses, Mandos do two things. Number one, they force you not to cut a corner on par fours or par fives that have shortcuts available. In other words, if it's a dog leg, it's a 700-foot hole,
You can't go up and over.
but you can go over the top, or there is a lane for you to throw, then you cannot cross that and cut it off and get an easy eagle or something like that. That's Mando. The other reason is to create a shot shape that, is more difficult.
Hmm.
Whether that is, I want them to have to throw, if you're a righty backhand dominant player, you need to throw a forehand on this hole, or you need to throw the most difficult backhand turnover you've ever thrown. So in terms of thinking about it in the course design, those are the two reasons. And then yes, three, I'll give you three for safety. It is also important, and there are a lot of Mandos on a lot of courses for that reason. But those are my two reasons. So if you make the Mando, in other words, you have already completed either of those steps. So you have created the shot shape they were looking for, or you have not cut off the corner that you weren't supposed to,
Then how
you
are
should
you in
not
the
be
wrong?
punished. You should not be punished for that. You're talking about a shot that completely passed through a set of double Mandos, hit a tree, and accidentally kicked the wrong direction. Now, you might look at me and say, well, I mean, if he hits a tree and kicks backwards into the water, it's kind of the same situation. Sure, water is there. These Mandos are man made, and they serve those two purposes, and he met those two purposes. He should not be
If you're
punished
gonna
for it.
have the Mando play like that, then require the imaginary wall to be OB. Like truly, just stake it out through the woods, through wherever. If there's an imaginary wall through the double Mando, have it going from this tree to wherever it needs to go as OB. That there it
It
is.
just,
It's
it
dumb.
doesn't,
There's no
uh,
difference in that.
I just, I don't understand why it's even a rule.
I
Now,
don't
I
either.
did create a I created a poll on Twitter, and I want to see what your take is. So, um, the worst rule issue of 2022 so far. I'm gonna give you your three options. Well, there's a fourth option, but the inconsistency of calling the 30-second violation, obstacles in your stance clarification, or the Mando clarification. What's the worst rule issue we've had in 2022 or other, and give me what it is if you think it's none of those three.
Okay. So, well, it's definitely between B and C. Um, I
I
I don't
I still
know.
think
I
A has to be in the running just based off the fact that
but
at
it's
least
so much to
B and
where
C have clearly defined, like,
no,
it's dumb,
I
but
get
it's
it.
clearly
I
defined.
get it, but it's really not like because there's so many players that don't play like that as well. You know what I mean? Because we seen it. Okay, we seen it at Music City Open.
Yeah.
Mando go straight up and over. Yeah, made the Mando. That imaginary wall is just not there. I guess.
I
Eh,
mean, you still have to go outside of it technically, but that also brings in
eh,
the two things. Number one, your card has to agree to it. In other words, your card has to say, "Yeah, you missed a
yep.
Mando," and everybody has to second it. Or and number two, I should say, benefit of the doubt goes to the player. And since it's an imaginary line, it's not physical. When that line technically goes up vertically in an infinite manner, if you miss it, if you cut in front of it, and nobody sees it, It's safe.
Right. But I mean, it goes the same way with the card mates on the 30 seconds as well. I just don't. I think that that one should be a lot easier to call. But to be frank, I don't think it's the worst one because a lot of people just don't care. Um.
So, but the problem, so the problem with the inconsistency on the 30 seconds is not that it's there. It's that it feels like it's become arbitrarily called. It's not like everybody has to adhere to this rule. It's we will call this person and this person, but not that person.
Right. I mean, at that point, it's an unfair rule, but I still don't consider it a dumb rule. Um.
Not a dumb rule, but it's a rules issue for sure.
Yeah, it's an issue. But as far as the most dumb rule, I, I don't like either one of
Yeah, but
the
I mean,
lie or the Mando.
what I
Um,
didn't say was the dumbest rule. I just said the worst rule issue of the year so far. And that's why the third, because here's the thing about the 30 seconds, and this is why it's up there. And
so
I'm
you're
not trying
talking
to tell
about
you that.
no, you're
I'm
talking
saying like that
about
rule single-handedly basically pushes a player to a 9 month suspension. Whereas you have another player literally a couple weeks later who should have been called on it 15 times in the final round alone and did not, and never got a stroke penalty for that. That's arbitrary and that's disgusting.
yeah.
But to be
It's
completely
it's
frank,
a bad
I
it's
am
a
playing
bad
devil's
rule
advocate here.
issue,
I
but
agree it's not the worst rule of
I
the
just
three.
don't think so.
I want to make that known for everybody who's listening. I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm trying to make sure that he understands that I think it's on the same level as these three. I don't think it's the worst though.
I just can't. I like I it's just not fair. It's not a fair rule. Well, it's a fair rule. It's just not being fairly called. Um,
Exactly.
so the thing about the lie situation, I don't think it's the worst rule issue. Simply for the fact of no professional disc golfer is calling somebody for moving a twig with their foot. They're just not. Um, we haven't heard of it. We haven't seen it, and believe you me, we would have known.
That's true,
We would have known.
but I do have to say that I can definitely like physically point out times where I've seen players go down to pick something up in their lie and stop themselves and not move it, which is something that like
But you know what? You know what you said there. That the key word is you seen them. So therefore, they're being watched. Okay. Um,
yeah.
so many players that are spread out. You don't think they're gonna kick a pine cone out of the way? Absolutely, that pine cone's dust. All right, that pine
I
cone
didn't well,
gone.
they didn't kick it. They didn't kick it out of the way. They stepped on it
They
first,
brushed it.
and
I'm
then
sorry, it wasn't a part of the course. Um, so yeah, the
it
Mando
was a
rule
pine
for
cone on the
me
I stepped on it
is
by
the
accident.
worst rule issue for me. Um, it's just plain downright stupid.
Stupid.
It's
Now
stupid.
the biggest issue I have with this rule as well is not like in this situation is not the way that it changed the outcome. Because I'm gonna be completely honest, I think the four is the same either way. Given where he was and the shot he had to shape to get there for a chance at par, don't get me wrong, Simon Lazard is fantastic. There was always a chance he could have made that shot happen. 100% possible. I don't think it happens though. I think he takes the four either way. If anything, actually taking that Mando and getting to go from the drop zone where he has a straight shot to the basket helped.
Potentially.
Because the camera views that I saw, he did not have a shot from where he was going to be standing. Uh, but also, it took them 10 minutes with Jeff Spring on the card with them to figure out how to handle that situation properly.
That's
Two
because it's
things. Number one, they
honestly
couldn't figure.
the first time that something like that had come up on the lead card of a live event. Um,
Yeah,
whereas usually you can question something like that, do a um, what's provisional? Yep,
provisional.
yep. Do a provisional, play it from both ways, move on, ask the tournament director later. This was the lead card. Tournament director's there. uh, you know, it had to be called then. So, but yeah, I do kind of agree that it took a little bit too long. You
Yeah,
should
because
probably know this, but
here's the thing though too. You're talking about this. All of it is on video. They would have had everything that they needed to take it as a provisional
yeah,
and play forward, get the score back within 2 holes. So by hole 14, I think the TD would have been able to make a decision
I think so too.
and get back to them and adjust the score accordingly and continue moving because the TD was not there. I don't believe.
I,
Uh,
TD may have been on
I
hole 18
Yeah, Jeff
potentially.
Jeff was walking with the card because that's what Jeff usually does,
Mhm.
and he is generally, I can't promise he always is, but he's generally appointed as the
Marshall.
as a marshal on the course. So
Yeah,
he has final ruling if he so chooses in those
right.
situations. But even he was uncomfortable with what he was looking at. Like the biggest thing that I noticed, number one, was they couldn't determine what the direction of the line was supposed to be. Does it go in the direction of the arrow as it was posted on the tree? Does it go in the direction of the
The
tee to the
fairway.
basket perpendicularly, or what?
That's
What? And I'm
something that
just
I've
like,
constantly wondered is because it says a vertical plane. It doesn't necessarily say horizontal facing a certain direction. So it's kind of a vague rule um in general, right? So
so
that
then
one
I
was
mean
pretty clear enough that it crossed. Um
well,
but
but it wasn't. That was the whole point. Was they said, well, if it's this direction, then this is a judgment call. It might have crossed, it might not have crossed, but if this is direction, then it's definitely, whatever. So that was part of the conversation. Was one direction it was clear, and one direction it was like maybe it crossed. We're not really sure, or whatever it
right.
was, that conversation. But for example, if we talk about, we put so much effort to go out there and put in like OB lines and put in the circle whiskers or circle lines and all that. I mean, how hard would it be if we're going to have this rule and it's going to be in place? Do we need to start putting in a line, even if it's not an indefinite line? You go in there, just put an L on the marker, so like the tree,
It
and then
you
on the
kind of
ground that
have
goes that
a
extends for at least a
direction.
couple of feet, so
Exactly. That's
the actual direction of the OB line.
I completely agree. If this rule stays, that is what is going to have to happen. Like it's a
But
must have.
it has to. But if we're being completely honest, EDGA, please do not keep this rule. I swear,
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
it's bad.
All right. So yeah, congratulations to Simon and Kristen on Des Moines Challenge. This was also, shout out Statmando, the first time that two European players have won an Elite Series event. First time ever.
First time.
So
Wow.
I actually kind of was surprised at that because Simon's done so well
Yeah.
this year, but um it's just never happened before. So
Sure.
heck yeah. Um
Well, I believe.
it's time to go ahead and swap over into a little bit of Worlds preview. Um
Yeah. Why don't I think we have a word from another sponsor, and then we can talk
absolutely.
about our power rankings, update
We
our power
do.
rankings real quick, and then head into worlds.
How did you know? That's where I was going with this. We'd like to thank my voice for not cracking. And then we, yeah, we would like to thank Disc Disciples for being a sponsor of this episode. Um, Disc Disciples is a pretty great, uh, pretty great league. At the very least. You should check their schedule out on UDisc. They play PDGA sanctioned rounds on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Saturdays. Um, Speaking of which, this Saturday, actually, it'll be September the 3rd, 2022. You can check this out on Disc Golf Scene. They are hosting a tournament at the Highland Park at J. Travis Price Park in Springfield, Tennessee. It is a Championship Flex Start. So definitely check that out. It just got posted this past week. So please go give that a chance. It's a Flex Start. You can go play it, have fun anytime you want. Um, you can grab a Sanction League round pass or check out their gear as well on store.discondisciples.org. They also put on multiple tournaments throughout the year, this being one of them, to help fundraise for various causes, both in the disc golf community and beyond. So, anytime disc golf community gets to help one another, I know they do, and Disc and Disciples is just a great way to help do that. We thank them for being a sponsor of this podcast. Boom, boom. So,
Thank you.
yeah, shout out
So,
Disc and Disciples. Um,
you
so
have those.
heading, I have those.
You have those power rankings.
I do actually. I
So let's
do.
let's pull up our former power rankings, our most recent
All right.
list.
So, our former rankings. He not on this page. On this page.
Hmm.
Gotcha. All right. So, MPO. We have Calvin Heimberg, Simon Lazat, Paul Macbeth, Ricky Wysocki, Chris Dickerson, Gannon Burr, Corey Ellis, Isaac Robinson, Kevin Jones, Kyle Klein. Yeah.
Okay.
That is our most recent one. On our FPO, we have Paige Pierce, Katrina Allen, Val, um, Valerie Mandahano, Owen Scoggins, and then Missy Gannon. We had took Kristen off of there strictly because of injury and time off.
Okay. Okay. So
So
let's.
yeah, we're about to flip flop some stuff. I already know. I'll get my
And
pen ready.
if I remember correctly, let's say so those rankings happened post Deglow.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, right after Calvin won Deglow.
Yes. Okay. Um. All right. So since Deglow, we've had three events: Mid America Open, Ledgestone, a DMC. So I want to basically kind of focus on those events and how those players we're talking about have performed in those situations. Now, one
Right.
thing's clear is I think we can agree that Tatar taking first at DMC boosts her up into the top five. How far?
Absolutely.
We'll talk about in a second. That means that one person needs to be kicked off because I think we can safely keep everybody else there.
Yep. And I think I know who's getting kicked.
Who you got?
I think Val is getting kicked off the top five. Missy and Owen has earned their spot there. Val has kind of been a little lackluster this past, I would say, couple months. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
Kristen probably knocks Val off of the top five for us.
Okay. I 100% agree with that. So we move up to Tar. Val gets kicked off. Now we just need to reorder them accordingly. Um, so in terms of what has happened, uh, Paige Pierce obviously winning European Open, fourth at Deglow, third at Ledgestone, uh, tied for fifth at DMC.
Right.
So still consistently there in the top five. She's
Yeah.
not, squandering a little bit. Allen at sixth at Deglow, skipped Mid America, seventh and 11th at Ledgestone and DMC.
Hmm.
Um,
That bumps her down.
for sure. And not only, so I think Owen Scoggins moves all the way down to fifth, I believe. Okay, because she still doesn't have a win, right?
I
She
agree.
skipped Mid America and DMC, took second at Ledgestone. So without the win, although she's played well enough to stay in the top five for me personally, I think she loses credibility at competing for anything more than fifth.
Right.
Um, because if
So
anything else, we would need to consider, you know, swapping her with Sarah Hokum as well,
right.
which I don't necessarily agree with.
No, I don't
Um,
either. Um. So hear me out on this. So I'm
okay.
thinking, this is my top five. What I kind of think, and then you can talk me out of it. if need be. But
Sure.
Owen Scoggins fifth, Katrina
Yep.
Allen fourth, Missy Gannon third, Paige Pierce second, Kristen Tatar first. I think first and second
Absolutely
can
not.
be flip flopped,
Yeah, I think you have to keep Paige up at the top. Paige has won two majors and an elite series.
but
Two elite series.
we're just talking about the recency bias mostly.
Sure,
Um,
but Kristen Tatar brings herself back up to being on this list at all because of the podium and the first. And I don't think it's enough to overtake
it's
first.
just
You
one of
see what
those
I mean?
things. When Kristen is there, she's more than likely going to win.
I mean, that's true, but
It's as far as power rankings, I that is my argument. Um, can you
I mean, you're
can you
still.
do a quick head to head?
I am. I'm going to do that here real quick.
Oh, nice.
A head to head, but I don't want
But
to discount the fact that you're talking about Kristen Tatar missed literally 10 events in a row,
I
and
I agree.
Paige won two events in that time.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to really. Um, let's see here if I can get their website has changed so much.
And don't
Blah,
get me
blah, blah, blah,
wrong,
blah.
I'm not against putting Paige in first. I'm just trying to promote an argument where I could see either one potentially being there.
I don't want rankings. Why are you doing this?
But as far as
Give me
third,
head to
fourth,
head
and fifth,
matchups,
are
please.
you content on that? With
Third,
Missy
fourth, and fifth is
third,
perfect.
okay. Missy third,
Yes.
Katrina fourth, Own fifth. Missy definitely edges out Katrina there, strictly because of the recency bias. Getting a win at Ledgestone
Yeah, I'd
definitely
agree.
helps.
Hang on, this takes so long.
It takes so long.
Okay,
No,
so why did you do that? You are so dumb. You are really dumb for real.
he's just talking to himself. Don't
I am.
worry.
Okay, so head to head matchups, they are 4, 4, and 1 against each other.
Oh wow.
Three wins to Tatar, two wins to Page, 3 seconds to two, same 2 to 1 in thirds. Both of them 100% top 10. Um, Kristen is edging out Page in strokes.
And
So,
top three. Um.
uh, probably it doesn't show that.
Oh yeah. I know that one for sure, just because we know the stat that Kristen hasn't missed podium.
Right.
Um.
So, with all that being said, go back to what they have done. Um, is two Elite Series and two majors for Page
Hmm.
versus the three Elite Series for Kristen. It has to be Paige. Kristen definitely earned the top five and earned the argument for one, but did not earn one. Not
I'm
yet.
I'm fine with it.
I'm willing to say if she continues playing, she does not get hurt anymore and continues to play a good schedule from here on to the next rankings,
Yeah.
she will overtake number one unless Paige wins Worlds.
If Paige wins
And
Worlds, she's a lock at number one for the entire rest of the season. Because she has won three majors at that point.
yeah,
I mean, you can't. That's undeniable.
I take it back actually. So Paige has won three three Elite Series and two majors to three Elite Series for Kristen. So yeah, it's not even a question at that point. The win, the third place in the win for Kristen definitely gets her back up on the list and leaped her. I don't want to, sell anything short of the fact that she literally leapfrogged from not even on the radar all the way back
into second.
into the top five to begin with.
Yeah,
But to do that and jump all the way into second, even after Missy took a win in this last
yeah.
section as well,
She's got a
that's impressive.
huge dominance factor. She has to,
There's just absolutely. I
because
don't know what that
Paige does not play the same when Kristen is present.
true.
You know,
So
Paige and
Cri-
Katrina have had a lot of great battles. Paige and Kristen's only had like one.
Kristen's dominance factor is at 100 versus Paige's 53 right now.
Oh wow.
So in other words,
Oh wow.
and I don't want to sell short. See, here's the thing about power rankings is that power rankings take, especially the way that, so we're doing them very similar to any sport. It's an entire season, but the most recent events have the most weight. But
Wait.
we still have to consider everything because
Yes.
this is power rankings for the whole season. So if you're talking about Kristen Tatar not getting injured at all this year, clear cut number one.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind, but she missed so much time, which was so detrimental into her ability to stay on
Yeah.
this, number one spot. Uh, but I completely agree with you. Unless Paige wins Worlds, Kristen probably takes number one in the next power ranking.
I think so too. But we'll get to that. Now on over to MPO. Um, I think it's pretty clear cut. We can go from the top down with this one a little easier than the bottom up. Um, so originally, let's start off with the top five. We have Calvin, Simon, Paul, Ricky, Chris. Um,
Okay.
I feel like Simon was already at number two. He's been pretty dominant this later, just as of late. Um,
Yes.
so I have absolutely zero problems with putting Simon in first. Um,
I think Simon one, Ricky two is clear cut. If you
that's
agree.
that's exactly
I
what
don't
I was
even
gonna
think we
say.
needed. If anybody's questioning why Ricky versus Simon, um, number one, Simon's played less events overall, and they are tied at 3 Elite Series apiece.
Yep.
So less events versus three, and then also um, Ricky just has a habit of like just absolutely bombing an event every now and again, and Simon does too, but with less events under his belt,
It's
that makes those wins just look a little bit better.
it does, and that's
Um,
that's kind of where I'm at as well.
and I'd
Um,
also like to point out, like if I had to say, I mean, if we put it lightly, let's say worlds. Neither of them win worlds. Ricky takes second, and Simon takes anything less than 10th. I would be willing to flop them again.
yeah,
Honestly, that's how
it's
close they are.
close.
Is that if one of them finishes in the top 10 and one of them doesn't, it's close enough for me to say maybe they need a flop.
Yeah, no, I'm with
So
that. Um, and then third, I think we pushed Paul. We push him straight over from his third place in power rankings last time. I think that's where he belongs. Um,
okay,
what do you
yeah, he's
think of
just
that?
been out. I mean, outside of his 16th at DMC, and his 14th at Beaver State, which was the Silver Series, anyways. Basically, all top 10 finishes and his wins. Second at European Open, which was a masterful performance,
Mm-hmm.
and that honestly deserved a first. And second at Ledgestone. Yeah, I would lateral him
Okay.
for sure.
All right. And then we've got Calvin, Chris, Gannon. Um, how has Calvin finished the past three events? Because I don't want to drop him too far off of that number one spot, but
I think
I don't
he's gonna
really
go. He's got to go fourth because you talk. Nobody in the bottom five has done anything to push up into the top five, right?
know. Gannon is right in sixth, so he's probably gonna jump Chris Dickerson if I had to guess.
I would agree with that, but definitely not enough to
Jump
jump
Calvin.
Calvin's first at Deglow. 10, tied for 10th at Ledgestone, 35th at DMC.
Mm,
Eh.
it's one of those.
Again,
How did
DMC
how did
was
Gannon
for
do?
top players in the. So this is. I want to put this out there for top players in the world. This is how DMC went: 57th for Ricky, 35th for Calvin, 16th for Paul, 12th for Gannon, first for Simon. 16th for Chris. So I mean, if you talk about all of the top players, DMC was really not a good showing for anybody except for Simon.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of that comes down to what are they working on? What are they focused on? Are they focused on Worlds? Are they focused on the event in front of them? Simon obviously was more focused on DMC than he was at Worlds. If the fact that he didn't fly into Worlds until literally yesterday wasn't sign enough, now you know.
Right. Yeah.
So,
So what are we thinking then? Calvin Gannon.
Calvin, Gann, and Chris.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
I don't know about Chris just yet, but I'll go Calvin Gannon. Um.
I the thing about Chris is that so what do we have? Um,
So it's
7 through 10.
Corey Ellis, Isaac Robinson, Kevin Jones, Kyle Klein. Um.
Ellis, Robinson,
Jones, Klein.
Klein.
Um.
None of them have done anything to knock Chris
Kevin
down
Jones is
farther.
probably placed better than Chris Dickerson as of late.
But I still think that the wins
The
from earlier in the
wins
season
and the major,
hold the weight
I kind of do too. But I do think
because
that Kevin Jones has jumped up right behind him.
yeah, I don't know. Because has Kevin Jones won anything recently?
No.
I would be willing to jump Kyle Klein over Jones actually because
Really?
Kyle Klein since Deglow is sixth, fifth, seventh, and seventh. Kevin Jones is 11th, nothing, 12th, and third.
Mm,
So
that's pretty
Klein has not
similar.
missed a top 10 since Deglow, and he didn't skip an event. Kevin only got top 10 once and skipped an event.
Uh, Also, we need to look at Corey Ellis
Whoops.
because Corey Ellis placed second at Ledgestone.
He was
Um,
in the 50s at DMC, though.
was
Yes.
that
He was
hurt
down at 57.
for Ricky was though.
Yeah, but Ricky has 3 Elite Series wins.
Yeah.
The wins hold weight even when they get farther away.
Okay,
Placements do not hold as much weight the farther away we get.
so you're saying Chris, Kyle, Evan, Corey,
Yeah.
and then Isaac Robinson would be in that 10th slot. And we hadn't seen a whole lot of him. Is it time to bring somebody else into the top 10? One of those things, it's like we
So
have the name
he
there,
won
but
Idlewild, he skipped the Euro swing, but since then 42nd, 13th, 43rd, 29th. So
not
that's
great.
Deglow on.
Yeah, not great.
How about, and this is a stretch, but I'm going to give a little bit of extra weight because it is a win in this stretch, Alden Harris.
Okay. I I
10th is such a hard spot, but he did
But
win Mid
he
America.
did win Mid America, and he has played very solid this year.
Yes.
Um,
He needs a very good stretch of the next 4 events
to
to stay
stay,
on this list.
but I am actually 100% in agreement with Alden being at 10th.
Yeah, because if it's not Alden, then I think the only other player that could knock Isaac off is maybe Anthony Barella, but even still, you're talking fourth is his best finish.
Yeah,
He just has looked better recently.
right. He has looked better as of recent, but I think Alden has probably looked better throughout the year.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
oh yeah. So there's our power rankings. FPO, we have Paige Pierce, Kristen Tatar, Missy Gannon, Katrina Allen, and Owen Scoggins. That's your top five. In MPO, we have Simon Lazat, Ricky Wasaki, Paul Macbeth, Calvin Heimberg, Gannon Burr, Chris Dickerson, Kyle Klein, Kevin Jones, Corey Ellis, Alden Harris. That is your top 10. Um, I like it. I feel
Yeah.
very good about it. So let me mark that
All
down,
right.
put that pre worlds.
Pre
Um,
Worlds. Is
State.
everybody ready to see how that matches up
Let's see. I'm very curious
against?
now.
This is wild. Now, one of the things I'm going to point out, there's going to be a big discrepancy on FPO to start off with. Just fair warning. I know that they are probably taking total events as well as points earned and everything into account. So there's going to be a huge discrepancy here to start off with. But I really like our list comparatively, with the exception of this one item. Also, Statmando is famous for using more weight to recent events versus post events, if you
Right.
will. So, that being said, FPO is as follows: ranked first, Missy Gannon; second, Owen Scoggins; third, Paige Pierce; fourth, Katrina Allen; fifth, Valerie Mandahano. And getting snubbed for the top five is Kristen Tatar.
So we are not too far off of theirs.
No, and to do that without even looking at it, I feel pretty impressed. Now, here's the thing. Again, recency bias is more in their algorithm, and keep in mind that theirs is a little less feeling. Ours is statistical plus feeling based.
Yeah.
How have they
The eye
really played the
test.
season? Statmando is going to give you a lot more of the what do the numbers actually say about their play this year directly, and it misses some of the aspect. Is part of the reason why I think, a human based power rankings is generally going to be a little more accurate, because let's be honest, how many times does the number one power ranking in your favorite sport end up losing the biggest event of the year? All the time. All the time. This is the
Yep.
best team of the entire year. Well, statistically, yeah, you're right. They
Don't
win this thing.
remind me.
I wasn't talking about, okay, you know what? I'm just in general. Right? Listen, man, I am a San Francisco Giants fan, and I spent all of 2021 with my team being the best team in all of baseball, literally the best record in all of baseball, and they lose in the first round of the playoffs.
Well, I know
Okay,
how you feel, but
I know how you feel.
yeah,
We all
we're
okay.
we're we're there.
You're not.
We can
Look,
have the best of the best and still lose in the first round of playoffs after
we
a
can
bye. It's fine.
it could be worse. Okay, you could be a Jets fan.
Touche. All right, so um, I'm thankful for my Titans. Let's see here. So
MPO, you ready for MPO?
yeah,
I think you're going to be more surprised by MPO than you think.
probably
Like quite a bit.
they
Okay.
they probably have uh. Well, no, they probably have Ricky in first.
Okay. And for anybody who's listening, I really want you to know, like, number one, we didn't even plan on doing power rankings pre-show. This was something that
Kind
we
of
did on
spawned
the
on,
fly
yeah, on
because it
show.
was time, and I kind of just wanted it to be done before. I literally didn't even think about it until we had already clicked start. So we literally talked out our power rankings, physically talked them out. You heard every little bit of our thought process that went into power rankings this week. Nothing, we didn't think about anything before the show. This is Statmando's power rankings for MPO. First, Simon Lizotte. Second, Ricky Wysocki. Third, Paul Macbeth. Fourth, Calvin Heimberg. Fifth, Gannonburg.
Holy crap, we got it spot on.
We nailed it, man.
What the heck?
It gets a little more convoluted going
Okay,
forward,
but still
but
the top 5? That was impressive.
to nail the top five like that, I'm impressed with us. Okay, number six, Isaac Robinson. Number seven, Corey Ellis. Number
Okay,
eight, Kyle Klein.
okay,
Number nine, Joel Freeman.
okay.
10, Kevin Jones. 11, Chris Dickerson. 12, Garrett Gerthy. 13, Alden Harris.
So we we had both Joel and Garrett on 2 um power rankings ago, and they dropped off
Mhm.
this last one.
Yes.
For Isaac Robinson and Kyle Klein. Um, so I mean, we've been dabbling with some of those names, and we did get
Yeah.
most of them on the list correctly. The
Yes.
the
And
only
so
one that we didn't get was Chris Dickerson and Alden Harris.
Yeah,
Which
well, and to be
the
completely
Chris
honest,
Dickerson one was
Chris
kind of
Chris Dickerson easily over the top of Isaac Robinson, Joel Freeman, no question. Alden Harris, wild card. You can make an argument for or against him. Joel Freeman, let's look at Joel Freeman real quick because I don't think I remember specifically what Joel's most recent finishes have really looked like overall.
I know he placed third
So you're
at
talking
um
Deglow. So okay,
at
so
DMC.
we really started elevating him after Beaver State Fling was when we
Yes.
first saw him up there, right?
Yep. We
Skipped
had him in
Preserve.
6th.
Yeah, so he skipped Preserve, 34th at Idlewild, skipped Euro, 38th at Deglow, but 13th, 12th, and 3rd at Mid America, Ledgestone, and DMC, respectively. Without any wins on the season, I'm pretty comfortable leaving him off. I think we made the right call.
Yeah, I think so too. I like Alden there. The Mid America win.
Again, I mean, Alden versus Isaac for that 10th spot. It's a wild card. You guys make the call if you think we're right on that one, but I think it feels pretty good to have nailed the top five like that.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive, if I do say so myself. Um,
Woo!
but yeah, let's go ahead and go into a little bit of predictions. Um, what are you thinking? Let's start off with FPO. You give me your FPO predictions first. I'll give you my MPO predictions first. Um,
So
yeah, so on and so forth.
I'm gonna give you. I'm not gonna give you my one, two, threes first. I'm going to give you um a MPO and FPO prediction that is, I don't know, convoluted. We'll call it convoluted. I don't know if that's the right word for this, but that's what we're gonna call it. Paige and Paul, both of them, either one of them, doesn't matter, but I'm going to say basically both of them, not necessarily together, but individually, either win or miss the top 10 altogether. And I don't think there's an in between. I think this is the year that if Paul doesn't win, we see the streak of first or second broken.
Yep.
And Paige Pierce, I either she rises to the weight of winning number 6, especially after the documentary, or the
Mhm.
weight she's placed on herself because of the documentary basically just crumbles her. She turns into a freaking Chips Ahoy cookie that's been sitting on the sidewalk in the Nevada desert for the last week and crumbles to powder.
Yeah.
One of the
Um,
two. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But for FPO 1, 2, 3 predictions, I am actually going to pick Paige. I think she has too much of the natural killer instinct. I think European Open really kind of showed that. I don't think she will crumble under the pressure of this documentary.
I don't either.
I just don't. Um, Kristen Tatar takes second. I think that she's going to miss a couple throws just based off time off. This is a very long course, even for the FPO side. Injuries do not play well on long courses, and we're talking now. DDO was difficult and hard for people who were struggling with injuries for 4 days, and now we're adding an extra day on top of it. I know a few holes got easier, but most of the holes got easier in terms of how you access the greens. They didn't get like aggressively shorter. You're still talking that 90% of these holes um, require max power at least once, and 50% of them require max power at least a second time.
Mhm.
So, minimum, you're talking um, 25, 30 max power throws for 5 straight days. And that doesn't include every missed throw or the scramble throws, which are generally the way people injure themselves the most,
Yeah.
is doing something they're not supposed to do. And everything else that's included. I think that I'm going to go out on a limb and say Tatar makes it to the end of the weekend, which is a huge limb to stand on these courses. But that she's just a few shots short because of the injury.
Right.
Um, Going into third, uh, Gosh, third is such a hard one. And I think I'm going to go for hopeful versus my brain. And I'm going to say Owen Scoggins makes a run at the win
Okay.
and just comes up a little bit short.
Okay.
Mostly because I really want to see her in contention for this win.
Right. Um, with my FPO, um, it's hard to go against Paige Pierce. However, I'm going against Paige Pierce and you. And I'm gonna take the opposite. I'm gonna say Kristen wins. Um, she's just been playing really well. Um, I think the thing about it is like I want to put Paige in second, but I'm kind of like you. Like I feel if she doesn't win, she doesn't even make podium.
Be, and for anybody who's looking for context, I want to put it this way: iron sharpens iron. We kind of talked about that already. What happened with Simon and Robert, or what happened with Paul and Eagle. When you get into these battles, you play better if those battles
Hmm.
continue on throughout the entire week. The thing about Paige is I don't like Paige in the come behind battles as often as I would like Paul. Paige is a dominant player. I don't think of her as a comebacker or a closer as often though,
Right.
because she takes so many big risks.
Yeah.
And when you have to take big risks to get strokes back in a 5-day tournament, eventually that catches up to you.
Yep.
So
I
she
agree.
either she
So.
either holds the lead from day 3 until the end. I will give 2 days. The first 2 days are really just setting the tone.
Yep.
From day 3 on, you have to be in the lead
Yep.
if you're Paige Pierce. I think.
So with that being said, I'm gonna go with Katrina second, and I'm gonna go with Valerie Mandujano third.
Yeah, another feel good pick. I think.
Yeah.
It's just one of those like maybe it might happen, it might
It
not happen, but
well,
I really want it.
she's
I want to see her contending
she's
for the
got
win.
that. She's got the stuff. Like when majors come around, like
All of these players do though, man.
a lot of them do, but it's just something a little bit different about Val. All right, so
I'm
over on to MPO. Um,
well before that. I mean, dark horse for the
oh,
FPOs.
okay. Well, um,
Worlds is the best play, but Worlds and USDGC are the best place to pick dark horses because let's be honest, James Conrad,
mhm,
that was a dark horse.
yeah, you're not
That's
wrong.
a
Um,
dark horse. Also, I have to point out if you guys if you guys listening haven't like figured this one out yet, Ethan is hardcore fangirling over Val Mandujano this year. That is your fangirl player this year.
is it?
Yeah, mine's Macy for
Yeah.
sure. I love her throw style so much that I want her to win everything.
So
But
is that
yours is Val Mandujano for sure. Yeah, that's your like fangirl. Like you pick her even though there's no good reason to all the time, and I'm like, that's funny.
yeah? Well, she's there. She's in third. Um, as far as Dark Horse goes, um, I'm gonna pick Haley King.
Bold.
I It's a thrower's course. Both of them are. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and she is
Absolutely.
a thrower. I was gonna pick either her or Evelina. So, and I trust Haley's putt more.
That's a good call. So I want everybody to know, as I just talked about both of our
I already wrote it
fangirls,
down.
both
You
of our
don't even have
fangirls.
to say.
My original pick, actually, I want you to know because I did have this picked out beforehand. My original pick was actually going to be Henna Blumers as my dark horse. I thought the way that she played at Euro Worlds was or Euro Champs was wonderful, and I think that the course is set up very well to her game to go out and perform very
Hmm.
well. However, Macy and Vinny went out and won the Dubs Championship this week.
Yep.
and I'm thinking that might be a little bit of a Macy confidence boost. So I'm gonna go with
I
my
don't
fangirl for the
blame
dark
you.
horse.
I think so too.
I think that's a good reason, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I do.
probably not the smart choice, but
Um,
confidence is key, and to go out there
it
and take a
is.
win
It
before
truly
the
is.
event.
Truly.
Mm,
Um, all right. So my MPO, I get to go first. Um, number one, Eagle McMahon.
all right.
I think that he does it. I truly do. I think this is his world. Um, I said from the moment that Ricky signed with Dynamic Discs that I would pick Ricky for Worlds this year. Um, but
See the way he's going back on his word, folks.
you would have probably never
Actually,
known it.
I like it.
Um,
I like the drama.
yeah.
I
So
appreciate it actually.
you're welcome. And I truly think that Eagle is just the best player when he's healthy right now. What we seen at European Open was not it was alien like. Him and Paul are not this. They're not. I don't even know how to explain what we
They
seen
were
there. It was on a different planet.
they were in another dimension in
It,
that tournament.
that was it was a one on one, and if something happens like that again, I could see them going crazy. With a score. So I'm gonna say Eagle first, Paul second, Ricky third. Truly. Um,
Okay.
I can see a three-way race happening, and I would love it. I
You know what they
crave
say?
it.
It's better in a three-way.
You didn't just say that.
I'll sign off now.
Goodbye. This has been the Tennessee Twos Disc Golf Podcast, and we are never coming back. I'm just kidding. No. Um. Yeah. So I hope y'all got a kick out of that. Um.
I'm sorry
My
for all the
my.
PG listening folks.
At least you said it quietly.
Yeah,
So
true.
my dark horse pick, Brody Smith. Brody Smith is my dark horse pick. The original
I
dark
hate you.
horse.
Mm.
Can't have mine. I
He was well. I mean, he was at least on my board of dark horses
Yeah. He has to be. He
because
played so
well, and
well
how he
there.
played. Yeah, exactly. And the course suits his game.
It truly does. It's probably one of the best ones for him.
Okay. Um.
Awkward silence. Dun, dun, dun,
I don't.
dun, 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 dun,
I don't.
dun.
I can't like
Do it. Just
Paul Macbeth.
just do it. I knew he was gonna say it.
Sorry.
He went Paige and Paul. How
I
original. He's always the original one though. I'm always the one that's off the wall.
well, I mean, every now and again I get pretty off the wall. Um.
I'll give you that. Every
Paul.
great now and then.
Here's my thing. I truly believe, and I am going back on my word uh
How could you?
from a few weeks ago where we were talking about whether or not Paul takes over the total major championships um list as
Mhm.
the all-time leader in major championships. If Paul doesn't win worlds this year, I don't think he wins worlds ever again.
I agree.
I still truly 100% believe he will take the major championship um, number. I think he will hit 20 majors, but worlds in particular, if he does not win this year, he is never going to win worlds again. Uh, hot take.
Yeah, he's gonna clip that and listen to it every day.
I will send it to him
Ah, don't.
just to see him win worlds next year
Yeah,
and make me shove my foot right into my mouth. I'm gonna go in terms of Eagle. I'm gonna leave him completely off.
I
And
figured you would.
this course showed its teeth to injury-ridden players last event.
He's
Now
good
I
now.
know we're supposed to see better conditions than last event,
Mhm.
but it's Kansas, man. They could say the wind's going to be good for the rest of the week, and tomorrow is gale force hurricane winds. All
Yep.
right, it's Kansas. Um, the FPO division, I was saying that you're talking anywhere between basically 27 to 30 max power throws in a round. MPO is much worse. MPO is more like 40 max power throws per round.
Mhm.
Um, European Open is not that. And you you still have to wonder just how productive he can be throwing max power 40 times a day for 5 straight days before even adding
I
any wind or anything to that. Because it's one thing to throw beautiful backhand turnovers in Europe, where they had the best conditions this last year we've probably ever seen in the European Open. It's another thing to get any, like, 15, 20 mile an hour winds trying to throw a backhand turnover. That I am confident we will have one day over these 5 days where we will see sustained 15 to 20 mile an hour winds, regardless of what the weather report says right now.
Yeah, I
And I
wouldn't
think that'll
doubt
be
it.
enough. I think that'll be enough to derail Eagle from a shot at the win. I'd be willing to say he could still podium. I don't think he can win, not without a forehand. Um, I think I go Ricky second, Chris
Okay.
Dickerson in third.
What about your
Those
dark
two are
horse?
flippable,
But podium, it doesn't
but
matter. You got who wins.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
the only difference between mine and yours is Eagle and Chris.
I'm gonna go Anthony Barella as a dark horse.
Okay. AB. Not a bad choice. He's got plenty of distance.
No, he's got all the power in the world. He's got the
And
forehand.
I do
He's
want
got the
to
backhand.
I
He's
do want
got the
to
backhand
note
roller.
um that it was kind of hard for me to leave Simon off. Um I just
Deal.
he's a different player this year, but I don't know if he has that 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 lion. You know what I mean? That's like I'm going to do everything in my willpower to take you down. Like he goes out there and tries to play his very very best, but he's not playing the chess game of I I don't know. He
But
can though. It's so
the thing.
hard
So
to
but that's the thing. No, you are completely right. And I disagree. I don't think he can play that type of chess match because when he plays that type of chess match is when he gets himself into the most trouble.
yeah. Now that we've seen that,
So I don't think he can go out there and play that chess match. It's the problem is when he tries to play that chess match. If he
it
goes out there and he tries to
we
play that
seen
chess
it
match,
at
that's when he's going to lose.
what Portland Open?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's kind of what
I would say the European Open is where we saw it kind of backfire, where he tried to play into the chess match and it
yeah.
was like he wasn't even at the event.
Yeah.
Um, I I would be comfortable saying actually that I think Simon is flip floppable with Ricky and Chris. Actually, no, with Chris. I don't think Simon's flip floppable with Ricky in my predictions, but I think Simon is just as likely to finish on the podium as I think Chris is
Okay.
overall. He's got
Um
the power, he's got the rollers, he's got the finesse. The only thing that's questionable for me with him is um Simon loves flip ups and turnovers.
Yeah.
Loves that.
How good is that in the wind? Whereas Chris uses forces.
Yeah, Chris is going to stick to overstable. Ricky has the forehand to stick to overstable. We've seen him win in the wind on this course this
Yes.
year. We know he has the overstable. Eagle, that's another thing. We talk about those 40 max power throws. If it gets windy for more than one round, even puts him farther back in my mind because that is when that wear and tear on your body is going to mount.
See, I think he
Is
just throws
you
cloud breaker
throw
threes
40,
everywhere, and he's fine.
yeah, but you know, throw 40 cloud breaker threes with a tailwind versus 40 cloud breaker threes with a 20-mile-per-hour headwind.
We'll see.
We saw Paul basically look like he was in tip-top condition and almost win Jonesboro to, in my opinion, should have just dropped out of DDO because he didn't have the power and he did not have the stamina to complete that tournament.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I just think that these courses rack on your body harder than anything else on tour this year.
Yeah. I agree. I'm
And
not gonna disagree with that.
I
But
just don't see Eagle being able to push through that.
we shall see. That's all we can do is wait and see. Um, but we have hit 2 hours. Um, so we've got our predictions in. We've got our power rankings done. We've done the last two tournament breakdowns. We've done worlds preview. Um, we honestly are pretty good. We're pretty set. Kind of caught up. We're going to be doing
Yeah.
another podcast on Friday for those of you that didn't catch it in the beginning. Um,
Yeah.
doing another podcast on Friday night to recap what has happened so far at Worlds and how do we see it playing forward.
Yeah.
Um,
And for anybody wondering, hey, you know, I feel like you guys should have covered um the conflict between Page and PDGA and Emporia Country Club and that whole
mhm.
debacle. We don't need to talk about it. And the reason why we don't need to talk about it is because we've heard four different accounts of the same story and none of them line up. So there's no point. I
Until
could tell
there's
you
something
Page was
that's cut and
probably in the
dry.
wrong, PDGA was probably in the wrong, and the country club was probably in the wrong somewhere along the lines.
Yep.
I will say that I think PDGA should do a better job of making sure that the courses are available to everybody before Worlds, but at the same time they had a posted schedule of what was available and what wasn't available. Every conflict thereafter is he said, she said. Nobody can agree on what actually happened, so there's no point to talk about it.
Right. And that's how the cookie crumbles. So,
Okay, Bruce.
yeah. I was wondering if you catch that reference. Um, yeah. So, 2 hour podcast. We hope you guys and girls enjoyed this. Again, we are truly, deeply sorry for missing the past 2 weeks, but we are back on schedule. We are back on track without any unforeseeable mishaps. We will see you Friday night and then the following Tuesday, and we will get you that World Championship disc golf content that you deserve. Until then,
So much of it. Oh, before we sign off, for
oh,
anybody who has DGN, if you guys haven't seen it yet, the one thing we've been asking DGN to do for the whole year now finally happened. Featured whole broadcasts.
how many? Do you know?
There's probably two featured holes on each course, but the point is that
That's
there's going to be a
cool.
separate individual broadcast just for featured holes. I can't remember the schedule, but if you are a DGN subscriber, I believe it's free to you. You do not have to buy an extra package to see this. But it'll be very similar to what you saw at USDGC last year, where
Right.
they had like hole
Hole 17.
7 and 17.
Yeah.
And each course, I might add, both course will have featured holes, and that will be a completely separate broadcast from the feature and lead cards throughout the week. So check that
That is
out.
sick.
It should be awesome.
Yes, I
So
cannot.
excited to hear
That's
about that.
that's very awesome. Thank you, DGN, for listening. Um, until then, though, we will see y'all on the next hole. And everyone, Have a great, great weekend.
Peace.
Peace.